Today, I'm going to tell you how to get away with ripping off other people's songs. So let's be clear, you shouldn't rip off other people's music for any reason, but especially not for monetary gain. That's a no-no. Don't be doing that, yeah? Especially don't be doing that and then telling people that I said it's okay to, because I'll deny it. That said, it's perfectly natural to innocently create a piece of music that just happens to really sound like someone else's piece of music. It can happen, as we've seen in famous court cases like Joe Satriani versus Coldplay and the Chiffons versus George Harrison. It happens. So that's the situation I'm going to assume you're in, which has led you to this video. So in that situation, here are some things that you can do to avoid having to go to court and all sorts of unpleasant stuff like that. But if you haven't already, you need to subscribe to this channel, because every week I'm uploading guitar and music related things, which is good and worthy of your attention, I promise. And I'm also anticipating you leaving comments below and pressing the like button and all sorts of things like that. Let's start with a little side note, which is that generally speaking, there's a name for this rule, I can't remember it, but generally speaking, you should only publish 1 in every 10 things you create. The reason being that guarantees everything you release has a certain level of quality to it. So if you think your potentially copyright infringement-y piece of work isn't the best out of the last 10 things you've written, you might be better off to just bin it, to be honest. On with the actual content, yeah? I'm basically going to outline the various different elements that go into musical composition, and especially go into making really memorable and recognizable pieces of music. And then for each of those, I'm going to give you specific tips on how you could change them up without having to change everything in a song. To be honest, I probably could have called this video something like how to write more interesting music, but I didn't. I went for something clickbaity because I crave attention. Anyway, let's start with changing the key. Move all the chords to a new key. If you don't know how to do that, then on this channel I have a video I recently put out called Transposition. Transposition being the technical term for putting a song into a new key. The easiest way to demonstrate this is if you're playing a song using open chords on a guitar and you stick a capo on the guitar, you've just transposed it to a new key. Brilliant. Transposing a song to a new key might not be enough in itself, but it's certainly a great start. Did you know that when human beings listen to a piece of music, they almost always, in their mind's ear, will hear it in the correct key? Now that might sound obvious at first, but think about it. Someone with zero musical training is able to recall a song in the correct key without even knowing that they're doing that. That's kind of cool, right? So what I'm saying is change the key. Altering the melody and or bass line. If you feel you might want to alter or completely rework your lead melody or your bass line, the easiest thing might actually be to bin it, because if you try to recreate something, you're probably going to recreate the thing you've just deleted, because that's what your brain evidently thinks is the right thing to go on there. Unless you want to recreate it by using only root notes and fifths in a bass line, and the good thing about that is it's kind of a safer option copyright-wise, because the simpler something is, the less likely people are going to think you've ripped them off. Could you imagine AC/DC trying to copyright one of their bass lines by itself? That wouldn't... There's nothing to copyright, is there, really? Previously, what I've done, and what I think really works, is just randomly shift around some of the notes, keeping it within the same key, altering pitches, altering note durations, altering emphasis, and I'll do that in a MIDI editor without even listening to what it is I'm doing, what the actual alteration sounds like, until it visually looks entirely different, and then I'll play that back, maybe tweak it a tiny bit, but generally that'll do it. Just use the MIDI editor as a visual cue on what to do. Hey presto, new riff. Chords, adding or removing chords. You have to watch Axis of Awesome's video entitled The 4 Chord Song. It went viral a couple of years ago, so you may have already seen it, but the gist is that many popular songs will rely on the same 4 chords. FYI, that's a 1, 5, 6, 4 chord progression. And you can actually swap and change bass lines, melodies, vocal patterns, rhythmic patterns, whatever, between these songs, and they will all work pretty much. And that's what they do in this video. It's worth watching in its entirety. So you can use this information one of 2 ways. You can either use it to say, well, there's no point in being original, let's just use those 4 chords ad infinitum because everyone else does, which they do, that's true. Or you could use it to mean never ever use those chords in that order because you'll never stand out. So if you have used a 1, 5, 6, 4 chord progression or any other standard chord progression, I wouldn't stress too much about originality. However, if the song as a whole starts to sound like someone else's, then you can try a few things with the chords to make it different. Here are some ways to mix up chords really easily. Play them in the reverse order. Just start at end, end at the start. Easy. Swap some of them around. Again, really easy. Swap one or more of the chords completely with other chords from the scale, or indeed chords from outside of the scale if you want to be really original. Or you could completely remove one chord and just stick with another chord for twice as long. Less simple, but perhaps more effective, you could try changing some of the notes in a chord rather than the chord itself. So try using major or minor sevenths or sus chords. Or if that sounds like way too much work, try using chord inversions, which is basically where you put a note other than the root note of a chord as the lowest pitch in that chord. Or you change a chord voicing. For guitarists, that's the difference between an open G major chord and a barred G major chord. They're the same collection of notes, but they're just played in a slightly different order in a slightly different location on the guitar's neck. Or you could even play a triad on the highest strings like you would if you were playing a reggae song. Speaking of reggae, changes in style. It's really popular at the moment. I don't know why, but it is. It's really popular at the moment to add slight elements of reggae to popular music. There's another trend in the slightly more underground music, which is adding elements of 1980s synthetic sci-fi VHS things. I think that's Stranger Things' fault. I don't mind it, but it's definitely a pattern. So if you're trying to write some popular music, but it sounds too much like contemporary pop, try adding an element of something other than reggae or 80s sci-fi. You could punkify your pop song, you could slap some, I don't know, Gregorian chants in there, you could add some electro elements, just try adding in some different stylistic elements. A similar idea is instrumentation. Would your song sound more or less like another song if you changed the instruments that were playing it? Odds are you're writing for a standard pop rock ensemble, so vocals, 1 or 2 guitars, bass guitars, drum kits, maybe a keyboard as well. Keyboards are by far the easiest thing to change. If one sound bank sounds derivative of another song, change it to a different sound bank. Easy. Timbre, or sonority, which means the sound of a sound, could be the only reason that a song sounds derivative. Similarly, what if your electric guitar was an acoustic guitar? What if your bass line was played on a synthesizer instead of a bass guitar? What if instead of a drum kit you used a djembe, or a homeless man with a can and a stick? This could present some issues when you're trying to perform a song live, but the good news is that hearing slight differences between a studio version and a live version of a song, that's one of the reasons people will actually go to a gig, to actually hear it slightly differently, so I would encourage you to do that anyway. We're going to finish up with rhythm and tempo. Tempo is the easiest thing. You make your song faster or slower. Perhaps it's quite a subtle change, but a drastic change in tempo could help hide any similarities between your song and another song, especially if you increase tempo so much that you have to reduce rhythmic complexity of certain instruments. You should definitely consider altering a drum pattern anyway. More kick drum, less kick drum, maybe lean on a hi-hat in a section rather than a ride cymbal, or vice versa. What if we went even further? What if you had a standard 4/4 drum pattern, but you move all the emphasis to the second beat, or maybe even the 3 and? That could be enough to distract people from a song sounding similar without it sounding completely alien. Unless, of course, you've done that and that's what makes it sound like another song, in which case do the opposite of what you can work that out. You're a grown up, it's fine. A way more dramatic change would be to alter the meter. That's the time signature. Now, I'm not suggesting that you rewrite Katy Perry songs in 7/8, although I'd really like to hear that. But maybe you could put your 4/4 piece into 3/4, or if your song has a heavy swung feel, why not straighten it out? So those are some ways you can avoid a court case, or just straight up rip off famous people's creations, or to innocently write better music. Whatever you want to do, there are no judgments here. This is the internet. It's a safe place. That's not true. I'm sorry. Anyway, thanks for watching. I know you've already subscribed, so I'm not going to ask you to do that. Do feel free to comment with any questions or further suggestions. If you want to add to this video, do go ahead. Have you noticed any songs by your favorite artists that sound really derivative of more famous songs? Let's have a discussion in the comments. I want to hear about that. I mentioned Coldplay versus Joe Satriani earlier, and the Chiffons versus George Harrison. What are some other ones? Like, subscribe. I've said that. I'm rambling. It's fine. I'll see you later. Toodaloo.